From the world of politics to the world of business, this is Balance of Power. Live from Washington, D.C.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Joe Matthew, I'm Kaylee Lyons.
President Trump granting tariff reprieves to Canada and Mexico today, but only on goods covered by the USMCA and only until April 2nd. We'll get reaction ahead from Democratic Congresswoman Robin Kelly of Illinois.
The trade volatility fueling market volatility, with major equity benchmarks sinking to the lowest since before Election Day. Our political panel weighs in on how that might influence the president, even as he insists today he's not looking at the stock market.
We'll bring you an important conversation with two members of President Trump's cabinet, Interior Secretary Doug Burgum and Energy Secretary Chris Wright, talking with us from an LNG facility in Louisiana. Thanks for joining us today on the Thursday edition, the late edition of Balance of Power. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons in Washington. So much talk about tariffs this week. The market has been tearing itself apart, and we did get an update today.
Indeed. This afternoon, President Trump signing an executive order modifying the 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada and pauses on those two countries for USMCA goods until April 2nd.
It basically makes it more fair for our car manufacturers during the short-term period before April 2nd. April 2nd is a little bit different. That will be much more significant. But during this interim period, between now and April 2nd, this makes it much more favorable for our American car manufacturers.
This is the same just for Mexico, sir, the previous one.
Same thing for Mexico. So one for Canada, one for Mexico.
Yes, sir.
One for Canada, one for Mexico. And joining us now with the latest on the president's executive orders today, Bloomberg's Kate Sullivan. Kate, it's great to have you at the table. Welcome. This has been a real guessing game for a lot of people. You've, of course, been deeply tied into this administration. You covered Donald Trump on the campaign trail. He would say promises kept, but we're just having trouble following the ball as the market is on a daily basis. Are they figuring this out as they go?
You know, it has been such a roller coaster this week. I know I don't need to tell you guys that with the tariffs, all of the back and forth on this. And I think really what we're seeing is Trump's negotiating style and his tactics really on full display here, how he approaches these things. And I think Trump and the White House would argue, I think they're feeling good about this right now. And I think that they would argue that they've had success with this strategy, even as there's been so much chaos and confusion and changes this week, because ultimately they have gotten Canada and Mexico to take real steps to increase border security. That's something that Trump talked about a lot on the campaign trail. And then to curb the flow of fentanyl coming across the U.S. border. I think White House officials are still waiting to see Canada and Mexico both take more steps when it comes to that. There's a chance they're signaling an openness to making this very temporary pause, as you mentioned, more permanent. We heard Howard Lutnick say today, you know, hopefully Mexico and Canada will have done a good enough job on fentanyl that this part of the conversation will be taken off the table. Because, as you mentioned, this is still set to all go into effect on April 2nd. It's just a temporary pause.
Well, yeah, they are casting this as the drug war. The actual trade war part perhaps comes later on April 2nd when it's reciprocal tariffs on everybody. They seem to be just pushing everything toward that date. Are we likely to get an extension of that one as well? Or is that the day that really everything comes down and on a permanent basis?
You know, it's a great question. We actually just don't know at this point. I think, you know, we've seen, like I said, this is part of Trump's sort of larger negotiating strategy. I think we've seen, even if they were to go into effect, it wouldn't be surprising if then they were to be lifted. And I think, you know, the Commerce Department right now has been clear that these different tariffs would vary country by country. They're still trying to figure out what these different rates are going to be. But one thing I would say, just how the White House and Trump are feeling about the effects that American consumers might feel on this, I think I would just highlight, you know, it was so striking to hear Trump a couple of nights ago really acknowledged that the average American might feel some of these effects. I think you don't typically hear this kind of language from him. He said, you know, there will be a little disturbance, but we are okay with that. It won't be much. And then to farmers specifically saying, you know, there might be an adjustment period. I just want to highlight that because it's so unlike Trump to hear him talk about any kind of downside to a plan that he has. You know, he speaks in such hyperbolic terms. And so I think that was a really notable concession from him and really reflects the volatility that we're seeing in the stock market, because ultimately, you know, we know that Trump more so maybe than any other president, really views the stock market as a barometer for success.
All right, Bloomberg's Kate Sullivan, thank you so much. And on the note Kate was just talking about, we do want to have more on how tariffs already are influencing the economy with Bloomberg's Amara Omeokwe. So I look at the trade balance data today specifically, a record U.S. trade deficit in January, a 10% surge in the value of imports. Everybody's trying to get ahead of these things, basically.
That's exactly right. And that data just shows that many businesses were trying to get goods into the U.S. because there is all this uncertainty around tariffs, as you all were just talking about. I talked to a small business out in Idaho the other day, and she said she ordered a year's worth of supplies from China to get ahead of tariffs. She was just scared that she was going to get hit, and she didn't want to absorb those costs. And so uncertainty is really the name of the game right now, and we're starting to see that show up in some of the economic data. We've seen a souring in consumer sentiment. We've seen a move up in inflation expectations, at least in the consumer data. And so all of those things are raising fears that the Fed may find itself in a position where it has still elevated inflation and possibly slowing growth, stagflation, and nobody wants that. And
Concerns
so that's where
about
we are.
The job market aren't exactly helping either. That Challenger number this morning gave us a little bit of an indication of what these federal worker layoffs could mean for jobs going forward. We'll get the monthly report tomorrow. I realize it may not be in that data, but we're going to hear from Jay Powell tomorrow as well. This might be the last time for a minute.
Yeah, we're going to hear from him for the last time before we head into the blackout, before the FOMC's March meeting. I think that the headline numbers tomorrow, the headline job numbers, are still supposed to look solid. Unemployment is supposed to hold steady, a pickup in job creation. But the question is, going forward, are we going to see some of these DOGE cuts? Are we going to see this uncertainty that businesses are feeling translate into the job market and result in a slowdown in hiring and actual layoffs? We've been in a position where there haven't been a lot of firings. And so the question is, do firings pick up? And that would also complicate the picture for the Fed.
We'll put this all together, and hasn't been great for the markets. Bloomberg's Amara Omeokwe, thank you so much. Meeting us here at the intersection of Wall Street and Washington will be Romaine Bostick. As just moments ago, President Trump was asked about the recent market volatility. Take a listen.
President Trump, what's your thought about why the markets are so spooked? Do you think they don't like the tariffs, or do they not like the uncertainty with some of the changes and the carve-outs?
Well, a lot of them are globalist countries and companies that won't be doing as well because we're taking back things that have been taken from us many years ago.
Joining us now with how the market is reacting to these tariffs, or talk of them, Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, aforementioned in New York. The market's speaking pretty loudly here, Romaine.
Yeah, they're speaking loudly here. And we talk about the superlatives here, Joe. We talk about an S&P 500 now down not only since the election, so basically that Trump bump erased back down to its levels from November 4th. But more importantly, it's now down almost 7% from that all-time high that was just set back in mid-February. The Dow down about 6% from its all-time high. The NASDAQ now flirting with correction territory, 9.5%. And it's raising a lot of questions, Joe, as to what's driving it specifically. We know it's the chaos out of Washington, but is it the uncertainty, or is there a real material impact to the economy and the bottom line? You were just asking one of our own folks there whether that's going to show up in the numbers tomorrow. The answer is no. Is it going to show up in corporate earnings, at least the corporate earnings that we're getting now and over the next couple weeks? Certainly not. But we are hearing commentary from executives at Best Buy, at Costco, at Walmart, a lot of those front-facing, consumer-facing companies that have made it clear that they expect higher costs for themselves, and they've made it clear, Kaylee and Joe, that if you're a customer, expect higher costs for you as well.
Well, so, Romaine, if we're listening to what corporate executives are saying, and we're paying a lot of attention to what the executive branch is saying, is anyone really going to be paying that close attention to what Jerome Powell says tomorrow, or is monetary policy just not as much of a factor right now?
They're going to pay attention to it. I don't think they're going to hear what they want to hear, Kaylee, which I think is kind of the question you're getting at. I mean, the Fed has made clear that it's going to sort of wait and see. They want to see the impact, the potential negative impact, I should say, of what's happening in Washington. They want to see that show up in the hard data, and it's just not doing that. We've seen it show up in survey data. Survey sentiment is definitely lower than what it was, but it hasn't shown up in the the numbers that the Fed cares about most, which of course are growth numbers, consumer spending numbers, and inflation numbers. Now, that could happen in the months to come, but until then, the Fed's probably not going to budge. We heard from Fed Governor Waller earlier today, who reiterated just that. If I had to make a bet, my guess is Jay Powell will reiterate something similar. Don't forget, Kayleigh, we're going to hear from at least 3 other Fed members tomorrow. So on the heels of that economic data we get in the morning and whatever the market reaction is to that, they do have a chance to address investors and maybe, more importantly, Kayleigh, address the one person who probably matters most, and that's the guy sitting in the Oval Office.
I figured that's who you were talking about. Bloomberg's Romaine Bostick, thank you so much. Yeah. And still ahead, we'll talk more about these tariffs and the impact specifically on the 2nd Congressional District in Illinois. As Democratic U.S. Representative Robin Kelly joins us next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
The goal is to make sure that we actually do bring down these barriers that are impeding the flow of goods out of America, hurting American manufacturers, bring down those barriers for everybody across the board. And if we can get that reciprocal agreement, that'll actually be something that will be long-term more beneficial for American consumers.
That was Republican Congressman Ryan McKenzie of Pennsylvania on the early edition of Balance of Power today, sharing why he believes that tariffs will help domestic manufacturers. And joining us now for another view from Capitol Hill is his colleague from across the aisle, Democratic Congresswoman Robin Kelly of Illinois. Congresswoman, thank you for being here on Bloomberg TV and radio. When you consider tariffs, though they have been, at least in a large sense today, pulled back when it comes to Canada and Mexico, and what it will mean for your district in particular, which I understand has thousands of farms, what are you hearing from your constituents?
Well, I have 4,500 farms in my district. My district is truly urban, suburban, and rural. And I just had farmers in my office this week, and they are devastated. They're worried between the tariffs and between what happened with USAID. They are going to lose a lot of money. And they were, concerned about the USMCA, even though there's been a pause on it. But I think there's been a pause because Canada and Mexico pushed back on the president, and he's not used to that. But my constituents are very worried about the cost of groceries, the cost of clothing. It's going to be a tax on them if these tariffs go through.
Well, Congresswoman, it's great to have you with us. Donald Trump posted on Truth Social a couple of days ago that American farmers should increase their production ahead of tariffs taking effect. He said, "Have fun!" Exclamation point. I'm not sure if the farmers in your office were having a lot of fun, but is the idea here for long-term gain once they catch up with production? Does this benefit American farmers in the end?
I don't think my farmers see it like that. None of them have discussed it with me. And a lot of my farmers probably don't vote Democratic. And a lot of them, like I said, are very, very concerned about what's going on and disappointed. And they're already struggling. And this is not going to help them. And he may say it may help them in the long term, but they have to make it through the short term to get to the long term.
Congresswoman, as we consider things that constituents, we understand, in districts across the country have expressed concern about, there also is, of course, talk around Medicaid after the passage of the budget resolution earlier last week in the House. We got the score from the Congressional Budget Office yesterday on that, and I know that you sit on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has been charged in that blueprint with finding $880 billion worth of spending cuts. According to the CBO, that isn't possible to do, slash that much without touching Medicaid, as the government only spends $381 billion on programs other than Medicaid or the Children's Health Insurance Program under the jurisdiction of that committee on which you sit. Do those numbers seem accurate to you?
Yes, they do. And frankly, they're lying, saying that Medicaid is not a part of it. There's no way they can meet their $4.5 trillion that they are trying to find to give to the wealthiest among us if they don't cut Medicaid. They're lying. That's just plain and simple. It is not mathing, as we say, according to their numbers.
Okay. Well, we've got a couple of things that we need to get done in the meantime, including funding the government, Congresswoman. What are you hearing after the display that we saw at the president's address to Congress? What we heard from the likes of Catherine Clark. She said she's angry, Democrats are angry. Will there be a single Democratic vote to help keep the government open if it's a clean CR?
We're very angry, we're very frustrated, and we're still negotiating. Our colleague Rosa DeLauro, I call her the Beast, she's fantastic, and our leader Hakeem Jeffries, we'll have to see what they produce, but I know we're not going to be in the market of bailing them out like we constantly had to do last session. We're not going to do that this time, so we'll see.
Well, Congresswoman, as Joe alludes to the anger you and your colleagues may be feeling, perhaps none expressed it more vocally on Tuesday night when the president was addressing a joint session than your colleague, Congressman Al Green, who was censured today in the House, and 10 Democrats voted for his censure. What is your view on that decision by several of your colleagues?
Well, you know, we're not monolithic. We represent all kind of districts, and I'm sure that played into their decision of how they should vote. You know, some of us are in D+20 districts, and some are in, you know, R+1. It just depends, you know, who you represent. So that I didn't speak to any of them, so I don't know all of what went into their decision. But everyone has a right to vote, you know, as they feel they need to vote.
Well, was that a teachable moment for the conference, Congresswoman, or an indication of what's going to come? Obviously, life in the minority is a little bit different, and your role as an insurgent might be more effective. How do you see that?
Well, you know, yes, we had this vote today, but you saw last week when they brought up the vote that dealt with cutting Medicaid, we were all on one accord. So we will be on one accord when we absolutely need to be. We know the goal is to serve the people and put people over politics, quite frankly. And hopefully the long-term goal will be in 2026 that we're calling Leader Jeffries the Speaker of the House.
All right, Congresswoman, it's great to have you with us on Bloomberg. Come back and see us.
Thank you for having me.
Again. From Illinois, Democratic Congresswoman Robin Kelly, thank you. Coming up on Balance of Power, we'll continue to look at the latest modification to the tariff plan. Yes, it's changed again. We'll consider their implications with our political panel up next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. Now that President Trump has exempted many Canadian and Mexican imports from the 25% tariffs that he just implemented on Tuesday, 2 days ago, let's turn to this evening's political panel for reaction. Adam Hodge is with us, Managing Director at Bully Pulpit International and Democratic strategist, alongside Republican strategist Lisa Camuso-Miller, host of the Friday Reporter podcast. Welcome to you both. Lisa, we've heard, I don't even know if I can count how many times on this program now, that this is all a negotiating tactic, so no surprise that he is moving back and forth on these things. But at what point does it make him lose credibility with the very people he's negotiating with if he proves so willing to grant delays or exemptions?
Well, and I've heard that, too, on this show. I've definitely been paying attention this week because I'm curious what folks are saying about the tariffs. What's interesting to me, though, is that it does seem to be moving the needle. It seems to be getting the attention that he wants to be getting. And so for now, it feels as if this tactic that the president and the White House have employed is working for them. Yeah. So they're using it as a negotiating tool. It's a risky one, but it seems to be working so far.
So it doesn't matter, Adam, if everyone's got a copy of the playbook. Donald Trump puts the fear of God when he says tariffs.
Well, it's clearly put the fear of God in markets. If you look at what's happened over the last week, I mean, you heard from Romaine at the top of the show just how that chaos
round trip to pre-election day.
Exactly. And look, that is, I think, the one temperature gauge that Donald Trump listens to probably more than anything else. Yeah. But they're not strategic, right? And I saw some polling over the last couple of days that they're also unpopular with the American people. I think it was Navigator had a poll that half of Americans think it's going to make prices go up. 2/3 think it's going to create uncertainty in the market, and they do not want the prices to go up. That's what Trump said he was going to do coming out of the box. So the bigger thing for me that it boils down to, it's also not strategic. They're not dealing with the bigger challenges that we have from China and other countries that are just committing unfair trade practices that really put Americans at a disadvantage. So not only are you creating uncertainty and it's hurting his poll numbers, it's not solving the bigger problem that we have in the global economy.
Well, I'm glad you raised, though, the market impact and economic impact and how that may be impacting the president's decision making as well. We know yesterday autos already were granted an exemption after he spoke to the big three automakers, Lisa. Then Bloomberg is reporting now that major restaurant chains also talked to the White House the day before this delay was implemented, raising concerns about the tariffs. Is it actually the voices of business that might matter to him most?
Well, certainly, I think Adam's point is good, and that is that the president does listen to those kinds of voices. And so perhaps it is making some impact at the White House. But the president has also said, he said in the State of the Union earlier this week, is it earlier this week? He said that that it could be a short-term pain for long-term gain. And so as much as I think Adam's probably on the right track, it doesn't feel very strategic. Something in the way that the president and the White House is making this approach feels to me like they think that it is.
But the farmers around the country were voicing their concerns, and members of Congress are hearing that. And that's why you've seen some of the farmers in some of these conservative states making very clear we do not support this. CEOs like the CEO of Ford, even Ken Griffin, one of the bigger supporters of Donald Trump in the campaign, said this is not this is a dumb idea.
Do you look at these differently? Reciprocal tariffs would go into place on April 2nd. Is there more justification there when you consider fairness, trying to zero out our trade balance, as opposed to knocking your most immediate trade partners in the head?
I don't think that it is all that. No, I don't. I mean, I think the reality is different countries are more successful or capable of making certain products. And just saying we're going to just make it even across the board diminishes the ability for us to actually make these products here in America. I mean, some of them, there's a reason why the U.S. is not as good as Germany or other countries around the world at making certain products. There's a reason why we make a lot of soybeans and wheat, and we export those at record levels around the world. So there is not, I think, a lot of science and soundness behind reciprocal tariffs. I think it's going to create a lot of uncertainty, and it's certainly going to raise prices for Americans, and other countries around the world are going to retaliate back on us.
Lisa, we just have 30 seconds here, but what have we learned about the role of Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in these conversations this week? It feels like he's been on TV every 5 seconds, including on this network.
He has, and I think that of all of the cabinet secretaries, I actually think that the secretary is really doing his very best to try to cut through the noise. There's a lot of different narratives that are coming up around tariffs. I think what he's trying to illustrate is that this is very much a leveling of the playing field and a way for us to recoup back what we possibly need to do in order to keep things competitive.
Lisa Camuso-Miller and Adam Hodges, thank you so much. Our panel will be back with us a bit later on this hour on Balance of Power. Coming up, we turn to our conversation with Energy Secretary Chris Wright and Interior Secretary Doug Burgum joining us from Louisiana. It's next on Balance of Power. This is Bloomberg. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lines in Washington. Thanks for joining us. One of the first executive actions taken by President Trump when he got back in the White House was to lift the Biden administration's moratorium on new LNG exports. Earlier today, we spoke with Energy Secretary Chris Wright and Interior Secretary Doug Burgum from Plaquemines Parish, Louisiana. They were there for the opening of Venture Global LNG, a liquefaction and export facility that President Trump, in fact, authorized for construction back in 2019, his first term. We started by asking Secretary Burgum how long it'll take to get this up and running.
These guys are moving at record pace here. This is incredible. Chris and I had a chance today to speak to over 1,000 of the 6,000 people that are working here. But Venture Global has got a new modular approach to building these plants. They're delivering this incredible. This is the largest construction project in North America, and they've been able to bring this on in 2.5 years, a project that would normally take over 6 years.
Well, and obviously, Secretary Wright, the goal here is to elevate U.S. LNG export capacity, which is already at a record. Ultimately, what do you see the capacity rising to, and what kind of demand environment do you expect that additional supply will be met with? I'm wondering about the implications for pricing dynamics, especially when you consider that tariffs are in place right now, retaliatory tariffs against U.S. LNG.
Great questions, Kaylee. As you can see right behind us is a ship that arrived from Germany this morning. Pulled in this morning. It will sail before the sun rises tomorrow morning, less than 24 hours turnaround. So the fastest growing energy source on the planet for the last 15 years by a fair margin has been natural gas. So the outlook for demand growth for natural gas is tremendous all across the globe. The question just where is it going to come from? And of course, it's best for American jobs, best for American prosperity, best for peace and security in the world if as much as possible of that comes from the United States. We've already become the world's largest exporter, and I think in the next few years, you'll see U.S. exports more than double from where they are today, with lots of room to run after that.
And you mentioned tariffs.
Secretary Burgum.
One of the things that I was going to say with the question about tariffs, one of the things that President Trump is looking at is that our trade deficits with other countries that would sell more to us than they're buying from us. And one of the ways to solve that easily around the world with the countries that we're speaking to is for them to buy more clean U.S. energy. This is a way to balance trade. It's a way to help get the U.S. trade deficit down, and that helps every American because the gas that's going on in the ship is coming from all the gas fields across America. It's creating jobs all over America. And when we get at that scale and we're producing more here, it's actually helping us lower the cost of electricity in the U.S.
Understood. A lot of people, gentlemen, remember Plaquemines Parish, a lot of our viewers and listeners, as an area that was devastated by the BP oil spill in 2010. That put it on our collective maps in many ways. The local seafood industry was set back by many years as a result. Knowing the Biden administration halted LNG exports because of, they said, climate concerns, what assurances can you give investors, can you give our audience that climate protections will be in place in Plaquemines Parish this time?
Oh, yeah. Speaking of climate change, in the United States, we've driven down greenhouse gas emissions more than any other country on Earth by far. And well more than half of that came from one source, and that's natural gas. As I mentioned before, natural gas is just a fast-growing energy source. It's displacing coal in the electricity sector some places and growing as an industrial fuel. So the more LNG we export from the United States and right here in Plaquemines Parish, there's meaningful reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, particularly as you export natural gas to Asia, which is where most of it goes. So I think it's not only an economic win for Americans, an economic win for our allies that receive the gas, but it's not only lower greenhouse gas emissions, but it just burns cleaner than any other fuel. Methane is a simple molecule and has a very simple energy transformation.
Secretary Burgum, how about you? What assurances could you give local fishermen in Plaquemines Parish that you'll be watching out for their environment with this new facility?
Well, of course we will be. The U.S. has the most stringent fish, wildlife, and environmental controls in the world. And so if anybody cares about the environment, they should want to have every drop of energy, every electron of electricity produced in the United States. But also, this is where the funding comes from. The seashore restoration funds that are occurring across the Gulf come from payments that come from the federal government, that come from the development of offshore oil and gas in the Gulf of America. So this is the primary funding mechanism. So the more we develop, the more we've got the ability to make sure we're protecting the environment.
Secretary Burgum, I'd like to ask you about another source of energy, renewables, as the Interior Department, right when President Trump took office, froze permitting for renewable projects on federal land for 60 days. We are starting to approach the end of that period now, and I'm wondering if we should expect the department is going to begin permitting for renewables projects again.
Well, we're taking a close look at all the renewables because there are some segments of renewable, particularly wind. And if you take a look at offshore wind being almost 3 times more expensive than onshore, that these projects wouldn't exist without all of the tax subsidies that they've received. And they're not necessarily new. Some of them increased under the Inflation Reduction Act in terms of the increased subsidies, but these subsidies have been going on for 30 years. This is not a young or new industry. It should be able to stand on its own by now. And there are a lot of concerns around some of these sources, and whether it's not in my backyard, not in my front yard, not in my view plane, or whether blades coming off of offshore projects. There's a wildlife concern with whales that have been raised. So there are opposition groups building for offshore wind, and President Trump is listening to them. He wants to make sure that we're doing it right and we're doing it effectively. And the renewable projects are intermittent, and we need base load. And we need more baseload. We need energy addition, not energy transition. And we need energy not only to power industry and bring manufacturing back to the U.S., but we need it to power the biggest capital budgets in America are for the AI data centers where we're manufacturing intelligence. We need that to win the AI arms race with China. So we need more electricity, but that electricity's got to be affordable, reliable, persistent baseload. And we've swung too far in the way of the intermittent, unreliable. And that's got to be fixed. We've got to turn that around. Our entire grid is at risk right now because we've swung too much to the intermittent.
Mm-hmm. Secretary Wright, I want to ask you about the strategic reserve, not the crypto reserve, but the strategic petroleum reserve that Donald Trump has said he wants to fill right to the top. I wonder what that means to you, to what level you're planning to refill the SPR when it comes to numbers of barrels, and how long it'll take.
So it takes a long time. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve can discharge oil pretty quickly, but filling it is much slower than discharging it. It's unfortunate that it was discharged not for a strategic reason, but for an election reason. So we drained half of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve for politics to help the 2022 elections. That's reduced by half the energy we have stored in security for unplanned events. So, of course, it's urgent to refill it, but there's a limit to how fast it can be refilled. It's 5, 6, 7 years to get the Strategic Petroleum Reserve back to full, but we're dead set on doing just that. We got to restore in every way America's security.
Secretary Wright, I'd like to ask you about levels of a different kind, levels of headcount at the Department of Energy. As we know, next week, federal agencies have been given a deadline to present their plans to cull their workforce, part of the efforts under the Department of Government Efficiency. Do you have a sense yet of how many Energy Department employees may be cut and at what level of cuts it could actually start to impact the mission of the DOE?
We're working diligently on that. This is what's so refreshing to have a businessman as a president, right? Just the way you would run a business. Are you being as effective as you can? The goal of the Trump administration is to improve the quality of government services with less resources, less cost, less burden on the American taxpayers. So that's what Doug and I are businessmen. That's what you do. You're always looking at your business. How do you make it better? How do you improve it? Sometimes that's investment in technology. Sometimes that's streamlining processes, combining departments. So we've got an effort on that I think will ultimately deliver better services, but critically reduce the just massive deficit we've been running. Almost $2 trillion budget deficit in the last years of the Biden administration, not at wartime, in peacetime at near full unemployment. That is just a catastrophic course. So, yes, we're forced into a situation that we need to move urgently and quickly on this, but I think we got a great team of people working hard on it.
And Secretary Burgum, last one to you, sir, as Trump has tapped you to be the head of the White House's National Energy Dominance Council. What should we expect to come from that, and when will we see something tangible?
Well, I think you're seeing something tangible today. Part of what Chris and I have been tasked to do as chair and vice chair of the National Energy Dominance Council is to unleash American energy. And we're doing that across the country. Alaska had 68 executive orders against Alaska that was restricting its ability to produce energy. Alaska was being sanctioned more than Iran was by the Biden administration. We have an opportunity in Alaska with projects there to sell energy to our allies like Japan and South Korea, Vietnam, the Philippines. This will again help reduce our trade deficits for those countries. It'll help bring prosperity at home. So whether it's building infrastructure that's critically needed, whether it's producing more electricity in this country to help us win the AI arms race, or whether it's cutting red tape to bring capital back to the United States, because all the manufacturing that's coming back, they all need more power. Part of the reason why President Trump declared an energy emergency is we've got an electricity crisis in this country where we don't have enough electricity. So we're working hard every day and working with the private sector. Chris and I are meeting with dozens of companies a week to try to listen to them and understand where's the red tape that's slowing them down from deploying capital here versus perhaps deploying it in another country. We want that capital deployed here to help create American jobs, help the American economy. President Trump's entire vision is if we unleash that, we bring prosperity at home and we bring peace abroad.
That was Energy Secretary Chris Wright and Interior Secretary Doug Burgum. Our full conversation with those two members of Trump's cabinet can be found again online or on the terminal. And coming up, the DOGE faces continued legal challenges as forecasters estimate the agency's personnel cuts could reach 500,000 by the end of the year. We'll reassemble our political panel next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
I want the cabinet members to keep good people. I don't want to see a big cut where a lot of good people are cut. I want the cabinet members to keep the good people, and the people that aren't doing a good job, that are unreliable, don't show up to work, etc., those people can be cut. So we're going to be watching them, and Elon and the group are going to be watching them. And if they can cut, it's better. And if they don't cut, then Elon will do the cutting.
President Trump in the Oval Office earlier today announcing cabinet secretaries will take the lead when it comes to making cuts within their own agencies. He made the announcement during a signing of executive orders in the Oval Office, as we were just hearing there, but also had a meeting today with cabinet officials that was attended by Elon Musk. He gave us the readout on Truth Social. And back with us now is this evening's political panel, Adam Hodge, managing director at Bully Pulpit International and Democratic strategist, alongside Lisa Camuso-Miller, Republican strategist and host of the Friday Reporter podcast. So, Adam, in addition to what he said in the Oval, he said on True Social that as the secretaries learn about and understand the people working at various departments, they can be very precise as to who will remain and who will go. Is this a recognition of something on the part of the president, that maybe people aren't too satisfied with the job Elon Musk is doing or the way he's going about it?
I think it's also the members of the cabinet who are bristling at Elon Musk putting his stamp on their authority. I think that is number one. I think number two, members of Congress are also hearing the heat about the fact that there are veterans that are getting fired in their districts. Nuclear bomb specialists. They don't support getting rid of the nuclear bomb specialists or the FAA, air traffic controllers. So it is unpopular. And you've seen Elon Musk's his popularity tank. The last thing I'll say is they also don't support him making these huge cuts and then also on the back end awarding contracts to Starlink or $400 million for Cybertrucks to the State Department, right? All of that weighs on the American people's confidence that this is all above board and that they're not, the American people would be the ones who get left holding the bag.
We spoke yesterday on Bloomberg with Tim Burchett, the Republican from Tennessee, joined us. He's been a fan, obviously, of this whole concept, the DOGE, and of course he supports Donald Trump. Had this to say about the spending cuts that have emerged so far.
My concerns are, as they have been, is that any savings we get from DOGE, are we going to turn around and give it to the, as I call them, the war pimps at the Pentagon and let them spend us into oblivion once again? They haven't even gotten to education or the Pentagon yet, so I suspect when they get there, these others will pale in comparison to the waste, fraud, and abuse there.
Lisa, I'm not sure who he's referring to there at the Pentagon, but it almost sounds like the DOGE dividend that we've heard about. Where should the savings go? Should it be in the form of a check to voters or be put against the deficit?
Well, we've heard a lot of different ideas about what would happen. It's hard to really know. And I think Adam's point is good. To me, the cabinet has been confirmed, and the cabinet wants first say on how these cuts are being made. So where that savings goes, to me, there has been some discussion about sending checks back to the American people. It's kind of interesting. I'm not sure that could be deployed quite the right way. The money maybe should be applied to the deficit. it to me, more than anything, is the way in the government and the way this is often done is that once we find money, we figure out how to spend it in other ways. And I really hope that that's not the way it's going to go.
I mean, I think that's really smart. I mean, you have a lot of Republicans who talk about the budget problems and the huge debt that we're racking up. You have these savings. You would think the first instinct would be, let's give it to the Treasury, pay down the debt, like reduce the budget deficit. But yet they're finding another way to spend money that they don't have. So I think it's also incumbent. Congress should have a say in this, right? I mean, yes. Like, it's crazy to me that members of Congress are letting an unelected member of the cabinet, an unconfirmed member of the cabinet, of the administration, have a huge sway over what we do or don't spend on certain programs. That, to me, if I was a member of Congress, and I'm very much not, I would be screaming from the hills about, like, this is our job. Article 1, we're first. This is our responsibility.
Well, on that note, Adam, we spoke with a member on the early edition of Balance of Power today, Republican Congressman Ryan McKenzie of Pennsylvania. He sits on the Education Committee, and this is what he had to say about the possibility of President Trump signing an executive order to eliminate the Department of Education.
That would be something that should come through Congress. So we've heard the same reports, haven't seen the actual language on something like that, if it's even going to happen. So again, ultimately, that should reside in Congress, and we're going to make sure that on education and the workforce, we do everything that we possibly can to protect American workers, promote education, skills trainings, workforce development. We need all of that in this era.
So he says it should be up to Congress. We also understand that in the Senate luncheon yesterday with Elon Musk, senators made it very clear to Elon Musk he needs congressional approval for a lot of what he's doing. Are we starting to see the legislative branch pushing back, at least on the margins, Lisa?
Well, I mean, look, this is their power, and they've ceded power to Elon Musk up until now over the last 8 weeks. So to me, it seems like it's good to hear them speaking up and asserting their power. Also, too, they've gone home to the district. They've had to answer for some of these cuts, and the questions that they've had to take, whether it's through town halls or otherwise, have been really difficult. And so that alone will be the kind of motivator that maybe gets them to start asking questions and starting to push back a little bit.
A pretty remarkable story after we knew that the administration put up more than 400 federal sites up for sale, real estate. This is, we're going to make some money or save some money on sites that maybe were mothballed or not being used. Some of them appeared to be pretty important, like a 3 million square foot FDA research lab. There's a specialized satellite facility used by NOAA. And according to Bloomberg here, a Northern Virginia campus that was not listed in any federal property records because it was long associated with the CIA, a black site that's been outed somehow here by DOGE. Is this the cost of doing business? Elon Musk said there'd be some mistakes.
I suppose so. I keep referring back to the fact that Donald Trump is a real estate man, and so maybe that's just the way that he's seeing it through the lens of being a real estate mogul himself. But yes, they're moving a little bit too fast, especially in situations like that, because the people's lives are really at risk.
But when we consider the value of the real estate, Adam, who would be the buyers of buildings like these? Who's going to buy the FBI building in D.C., especially when you're shrinking the federal government and cutting contracts for those private employers that may have a role here?
Not to mention, like, the Department of Labor, like, right on the mall. I mean, like, the government is not a real estate company, right? Like, to be clear,
it is the biggest real estate manager, though, right?
It is, but let's be clear. Like, the job is to like help the American people, like, put a roof over their head, clothes in their back, food in their stomach, make their lives a little bit easier. Like, selling off buildings, like, it just seems to me like a bit of a red herring. And you've seen also with the DOGE. Creating real weaknesses on national security. The servers that they're using are not secure. Like, outing CIA potential, like, facilities is just a real damage to America's national security. And it's why the rest of the world is looking at the rest and saying, like, what is going on?
You guys got the Labor Department, Adam. You have a view of the Canadian embassy. Just think about that for a second. Adam Hodge, Lisa Camusa-Miller, thank you for a great conversation. Our panel today. Coming up, we'll look ahead to Fed Chair Jay Powell's speech tomorrow and a crypto summit at the White House. That's next on Balance of Power, Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lines. As we look ahead to another important day, and I'm sure another busy one tomorrow in Washington, Kaylee, it's all going to start at 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. The ground will shake. The markets will be listening. We've got the jobs report, but of course, well, we have our own expectations here. They are not likely to include the raft of federal worker layoffs that we heard about from Challenger this morning.
That's right, because the cutoff date was February 12th. Before the February 14th Valentine's Day massacre. The estimate for economists, by the way, 160,000 job additions in the month of February. And then we're going to get pretty quick reaction from the chairman of the Fed. Jerome Powell speaks at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. Yep, Jay Powell, and I'm sure it's something that will be in the air. That'll just be a short time, of course, after the jobs report comes out. And Kaylee, we're talking crypto tomorrow. Going back to your former life, crypto summit at the White House. Maybe the Melania coin will have a big day. Yeah, so we'll have you covered on that tomorrow. But first tonight, make sure to tune into the Asia Trade, 6 p.m. Eastern time, just ahead on Bloomberg TV and radio for an interview with the Bank of America CEO, Brian Moynihan.